Hey folks, this is a recorded interview with artist Patricia Yusuk and Karen Cornelius to discuss their exhibition at the Mennonite Heritage Gallery. This interview was recorded on October 25th, 2021, here on CKW 95.9 FM. This is Derek Brueckner, your Arts Talk radio show host here on CKW. Usually we have my co-host Dana Warren, but Dana Warren has been absconded with other tasks at hand today. So I'm going to be doing the interview by myself today, but very pleased to have two artists that currently have an exhibition up at the Mennonite Heritage Gallery on Shaftesbury. Very pleased to welcome Patricia Yusuk and Karen Cornelius. Thank you for joining us here, and a pleasure to finally have you scheduled and actually doing the interview. I know we've been in contact since August, and so we're now into late October and we're finally here. So thank you for being so persistent and being patient with us.
No, this is great, Derek. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's really nice that the exhibition is finally happening. It's been delayed as well because of the pandemic, as you know.
Yeah, I think I was there in, I think, late August, early September to have a look at the show. It was a great show, big space, and I was able to go in there with, like everybody else, with their masks, and had a great time looking at the exhibition with lots of work to look at from the both of you. And I don't want to start to summarize what the show is about. I'm going to let the both of you do it. I think that you'll do a better job, and I could summarize it, but I think I want to hear more about you than me talking. So I don't know who would like to talk first, or do you think maybe we want to talk about like how the two of you maybe got grouped together as two artists with two solo exhibitions in this space?
Well, initially, I put in a proposal and Ray Dirks came back and said, yes, it would be a great idea. And I asked him, I said, you know, it is a really huge space. Yeah. And I think it would be way more fun if there was another person exhibition upstairs. It also would give us another person to talk with and communicate with. And so at that point, he said, well, do you know anyone? And I said, oh yeah. And I could recommend some people. And then as we're talking, he said, oh, Patricia has sent in a proposal. You know her? I said, oh, yes, absolutely. And, you know, that would work. So, yeah, it was very cool.
Interesting, because, you know, looking at the exhibition, it seems like you both could have almost applied together. The work just fit really well. It's a great serendipity moment, I think.
Well, and when Ray started talking about what Patricia was thinking of in terms of the work that she was proposing, it was again, okay, there's got to be a real good connection there. And then when Patricia and I started talking, we realized that the tree was a real good overlap and connection between our work.
Yeah, we had a lot of meetings, especially with the lockdowns and the postponement of the show. Karen and I supported each other a lot, but we had a lot of opportunities to talk about the work and how it spoke to each other and what it spoke to the world about how important the environment was, especially that people were getting out in nature for walks more and more with the lockdowns and realizing just how important our natural environments were and how healing and how healthy, and that both of our work spoke to that because we had immersed ourselves in nature to make these works.
Yeah, no, it was really helpful to have that, you know, communication, especially during the pandemic. It was super valuable for me to have that connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you both know each other prior to the exhibition?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
But neither of you knew that either of you had applied to the space, though. That's pretty interesting. That's great. For me, I think that your comments about the idea of almost this, well, in some ways, I guess you were alluding to it directly, but there's this kind of reconnection to nature, partly due to the pandemic. I think that's pretty interesting. I'm a person who doesn't connect with nature that much, but because of the pandemic, I have been. Like I've been going outside a lot more and all those things. And yeah, I just think that's sort of interesting. Now, I think that maybe we can talk about the works, the exhibitions, maybe individually, and maybe should we start with you, maybe Patricia, and then go to Karen? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So the title of your show
is Tree. Yeah. And I'd been painting outside in the forest, for years. And my prior shows had a lot to do with work that I'd done outside on plein air. I'd haul my easel and paints up into the woods north of Gimli to work. And the more I worked with the forests, the more intimate I became with the trees. And one day I was in Artist Emporium and I saw these long, narrow canvases. They're 8 inches wide and various lengths. And I thought, wow, that looks sort of like tree trunks. So I took these canvases into the woods, and what happened was really, really interesting. Spending days and days observing, say, one tree in order to paint this long, narrow trunk with the variations in the shadows and the light as the sun moved across the sky. It illuminated different parts of the trunk, different colors reflected from the foliage and the meadows and sunlight, and markings on the different types of trees from the bark, wounds in the bark, lichen and moss. It became like living, moving tapestries that I was working with, because you'd be mixing colors to catch a certain shadow, and then you turn and suddenly that shadow was gone. And so it was really, really fascinating. They're long, narrow, sort of abstract looking paintings that reminded me of these living tapestries. There was this unspoken language that emerged on the canvas that was happening between me and the tree, these marks, these shadows, these colors. So that's how they emerged.
Yeah, when I saw the work, I immediately responded to those elongated canvases that you were working on. And to me, it seems like there's this kind of scale shifting back and forth between sort of a reference to a tree, but then you get abstract and you get into more of the physicality of material on the two-dimensional surface.
Yes.
And so there seems to be this like kind of sliding scale back and forth between those worlds. And the other thing that kind of comes to mind is with you talking about the idea of plein air painting, the idea of painting outside and painting the landscape outside, is that everything is constantly changing. I remember I did this landscape painting course a long time ago, and this professor once said, painting the landscape outside is impossible. Yes. Because it's always changing and things are always moving. And so ultimately it becomes a choice of what you decide to keep in terms of what you're seeing and what do you decide to ignore, and how do you combine all these different moments of time together. And I think that's what you're doing in that work, which I think is, very interesting. And then there's this kind of nod to abstract expressionism in my mind in a good way, and I think that all kind of fits really nicely.
Yes, I'm a big fan of expressionistic work, as you know, from my mark making. So it lent itself very well to that, and it kind of segued from the trees, which were done mainly last summer. And then over this winter, with really personal challenges in my life that occurred because of the pandemic, when I got back to the studio this spring to work further with the extreme heat and the smoke, and the trees provided me for there was like a springboard into doing abstract expressionistic type paintings that no longer had tree as a muse. They were coming directly from inside. There was still an organic nature about them, but it was like things dissolving, forms coming together, forms disappearing. And it kind of spoke to what was happening in the world, with things shifting and changing and being in flux. And I was reflecting that in the new canvases that came up this summer. And if I hadn't done the trees and the flux and the changes that were occurring, I wouldn't have been able to segue into this new body of work that I've just started.
And I love how Leona Herzog, who's been working with us, came in when we were setting up, and how she worked with you and visualized with you that you were placing all those other pieces within the forest. Like it was, that was just a lovely way of actually making that work sing upstairs.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot that Leona Herzog had been involved with curating the exhibition, so we should probably give her a shout out as well.
Absolutely, yeah. She came to the studio and I was tearing my hair out because I didn't think the new work would fit with the old work from last summer, and she was so confident and so skilled at like, yeah, no worries, this is gonna, and she did. She really pulled it together. It's a beautiful installation.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
wonderful to have her working, together with us, because she came to both of our studios, and then when she wrote the curatorial statements for our catalog, I mean, it was very good to work with her. She was great,
Yeah,
to have along.
yeah, absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's always good to have that curator in your corner, isn't it? It's just so if we've got about 16, 17 minutes left, but I just thought I would talk to our listeners for a second. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to a recorded interview with artists Patricia Yusuk and Karen Cornelius. They have an exhibition currently on the Mennonite Heritage Gallery that we're talking about right now. And so just finished talking a fair bit with Patricia about her exhibition, Trees. And then maybe Karen, we can talk about your exhibition as well.
Sure. My exhibition's called Growing, Going, Gone. And I was inspired by the tropical jungle at the conservatory in the Winnipeg Assiniboine Park. And I know that many, many people have treasured memories of this place, as do I. And many people, went there over those 100 years that it was available. And a lot of people during the last 6 weeks, came to say goodbye. And I heard a lot of stories from people. Some of them had been coming for 3 or 4 generations. There were people who had been married there. There were people that, had brought their elder parents, or people that had brought their children, or there was just so many people that came. And my whole inspiration and interpretation of this place was to talk about jungle and the environment of the trees, but also the larger issues of grief and sadness and loss. And that, of course, led into the whole environmental aspect as well, because we're very concerned about the loss of our environment now, and about the trees locally, nationally, and then internationally, with tropical jungles disappearing. So that was super important to the work. And I've included a number of small pieces that relate to my childhood growing up in the tropical jungle in the Congo, which kind of sets the stage for why I was so attached to this place. I used to go to the conservatory often, especially during the winter, and for years I used to take my mother there. It was a really important place, but it harked back to those strong memories of growing up in the tropical rainforests in the northeast corner of the Congo. So that was a really strong link for me.
Interesting, Karen. I didn't know that about you. Can you talk more about that your life in the Congo as a young child? It's like what were your parents doing there, or if you don't mind talking about that?
No, it was fascinating. My parents were there doing medical work. My father was a doctor, and my mom was retrained as a pharmacist. She was a teacher initially, but she retrained while she was there. And they ran small little hospitals, first in the jungle, and then in the highlands, and then back on the edge of the jungle. So yeah, for 16 years. So I spent my until I was 18 in the Congo, and then I went to school in East Africa and Kenya when I got older.
Wow.
It was fascinating. I'm working on a video piece right now with, collecting some of the photos from back then, and just some of the memories, because it was just such an idyllic childhood in many ways, because it was beautiful, and the tropical vegetation is so lush and amazing. And yet there was real danger, especially because of how unstable the political situation is in the Congo.
Right. I know in the 70s it was called Zaire, and then it went back to the Congo, and yeah.
Yeah, it had at least 4 names while I was there.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. I guess this is sort of maybe a little off the cuff in terms of the question, but I guess there was a period of your life where you never experienced snow.
Oh, totally.
Like how long did you go? I mean, coming from Winnipeg, I mean, I'm assuming you're originally from Winnipeg, yes? No?
I'm not. I'm originally, my parents were from the Philadelphia area.
Okay.
I married a Canadian and moved to Ottawa. And then we ended up out here via Eritrea. We were working in Eritrea, Northeast Africa, for a while.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as a person from Winnipeg, it's just hard to imagine that you would spend like so many years without a winter. It's like it's kind of incredible. Like so
Yeah,
I mean,
I loved it. And it took quite an adjustment to adjust to the winter here.
yeah, I'm sure.
So of course, going to the conservatory was just a place of, relief from the bitter cold, right? And just brought back all those memories.
Yeah, I know with me growing up in Winnipeg, like it was an annual thing in terms of school, like as you know, in elementary and junior high, it was an annual field trip for school. You would go every year. And
Oh, that's
so
pretty cool.
yeah, it was always great. It's like, and often it would be when it was cold out, and of course you'd walk in and the windows would be all fogged because the temperature is so cold outside, but it's so warm inside. I have fond memories of it for sure. I could be wrong, but I seem to recall seeing iguanas and things like that, which always excited me. It's like,
And
typical young,
turtles
yeah,
and the goldfish. And
yeah.
yes.
So as a young boy and young teenager, I always enjoyed that. So, Karen, I'm kind of, like now that I'm looking back at some of the images that I photographed when I was there, like I see you with your silhouette and you're with Congolese soldiers and different things like that. But I'm curious about, there's a strong kind of connection to printmaking in your work. I'm wondering if you could talk about the printmaking aspects. Like in
Yes,
some cases you combine printmaking with drawing, but there's definitely a sense that you're a printmaker.
Yes, definitely a printmaker. And once a printmaker and it get bitten by the bug, you know how it is. You
Yep.
just keep coming back. And I've done a lot of exploring in printmaking. I'm part of a worldwide group of printmakers who are interested in less toxic, more environmentally responsible ways of working.
Okay.
And so I've explored a lot of different methods and materials. And in this case, this whole exhibition is done using electro etching. So I've actually etched all the copper with electricity and copper sulfate and water. And I have a little setup there for people to see the tank. I made my own little tank. I first was introduced to this in the high Arctic when I was up working with the Inuit printmakers. Go figure, they had an electro etching system that was sold to them just before their studio closed. So we got it working and I was absolutely fascinated by it. So when I came back, I created my own much simpler system where I just got a tank from Walmart and I got a power source online. And then I did a lot of research, but there's no fumes when you work. And there's very little residue that goes down the drain because you create a circuit with your two plates, a negative and positive plate. And then where you've exposed the metal on the positive plate, metal is pulled from those lines. And where you've exposed the metal on the negative plate, it is collected. So you get two very distinct, very different kind of etches on both plates. You cannot get that negative plate any other way. Traditional etching only works on one plate.
Yeah.
So I love the process, and then the process fit perfectly into my concept of what I wanted to say. So I used the positive plate to talk about what was, and the negative plate to talk about the destruction. And then I use the drawing to bring in my emotional response.
Interesting. I'm thinking, I didn't realize that when I mean, I'm sure you had written material about it, but I was just too busy photographing things and looking at because I like drawing and I like printmaking and I like painting. And so I was just kind of enjoying the show that way, and so it's very interesting, this idea of, you said electro etching, is that
correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So I am actually etching with electricity.
Yeah.
And I'm running the electricity through copper sulfate and water.
Could you maybe, for our listeners, maybe just give, I know it's impossible to do, but can we just try to give them a quick summary of what traditional etching would be, like that process a little bit?
In traditional etching, you'll take a metal plate and you'll put some kind of a ground on it. I've been experimenting, and in this case, I used a soy-based ground. Traditional etching uses asphaltum and rosin and things that are not so good for you.
Very toxic. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it works brilliantly, but it's super toxic. So I'm always looking for something that's less toxic. And this is a ground that's made, there's a printmaker in Europe who's developed this. It's called Big, and it actually works really well. I've been able to perfect it, and I am just as happy with it as traditional ground. I can get the same kind of results. You know, so you put the ground on your plate and then you draw through it. And wherever you've exposed your metal, if you put it in an acid, that area will be bitten or eroded away. And that's what you're looking for in order to create your image. Because when you go to print that plate, you fill those areas with ink, wipe the surface clean, and then put a piece of damp paper on it and run it through the press. And your image will just magically transfer from the plate onto your paper.
So in your process, you're using the electricity to remove certain parts on the surface of the plate. And then then those areas get inked up, and then you print from there.
Yes, but the negative plate collects the copper. So it gives you a totally different look. It's more of a mezzotint, kind of very deep, rich black, because it's got all those little bits of metal. It's not smooth. Huh. Yeah, so it's a whole different look. And most people that have done experimenting with electro etching have not even, they just let the plate go black. The negative plate is not being used for image at all. Huh. But I thought that it would be a really great idea to experiment. And I got funding from the Manitoba Arts Council and the Winnipeg Arts Council to do residencies at Martha Street. And, you know, I really experimented, and it was great.
Good for you. So listen, we've only got about 4 minutes left. The interview is just zooming by because you both have been so interesting to talk to, and there's so much to talk about. I'm wondering if the both of you could maybe just mention your websites and maybe the or maybe we'll mention the gallery hours first, and then we can talk about your websites. Could we do that? And the dates of when the exhibition is up and all that?
Yeah, for sure. The Mennonite Heritage Gallery is at 600 Shaftesbury Boulevard, and the exhibition runs till November 13th. It's a Saturday. And the gallery is open from Monday to Friday, 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. And then on Saturdays from noon until 5 p.m.
And I'm assuming that they're still requiring people to wear masks and all of the usual protocols, correct? And
that's correct, yeah. And you can phone the gallery and make an appointment if you like, if you have a bigger group, or you can just go to the gallery. There's a doorbell right next to the entrance, and you just ring the doorbell and someone will come and let you in.
Okay, great. And maybe Patricia, we can get your website if you've got one that you can share or something.
Yeah, I do. It's patriciaeschuk.com.
Okay.
I haven't put up the new work in the show yet on my site, so I hope to do that. I was actually hanging wet painting right up to the. There you go.
As many painters will do.
They do, right? So the photographs will come up hopefully in the next few months. I'll be posting.
Can you spell your last name for us?
Sure. It's Patricia, and it's all lowercase, and then ESCHUK.
Great.
.com. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Karen, what about you?
I have a website as well. Mine is www.karencornelius.com. And I have a Instagram, which is cornelius.karen.
Okay, terrific. Patricia, do you have any social media that you would like to share too as well?
You know, I'm really bad with social media.
Okay, that's fine.
I do have Instagram. Again, it's just my name, but I haven't been very good at posting.
Okay.
Karen's really been so great at sharing our show on Instagram. I do post on Facebook from time to time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. So we've got about a minute and a half left, but any final words before we call it an evening for the both of you, or?
I just know that the gallery is having a special event on Friday, November 12th. Is it, Karen?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a fundraiser for the gallery and to honor Ray Dirks, who's the director and has just recently retired.
Yeah.
Okay.
He founded the gallery and ran it for 23 years, I believe.
Well, there we go. So that's a big,
Yeah, so if anybody wants to go to that or support the gallery, they can call. And
I think that the people that start these gallery spaces and run them, they deserve a very special spot, I think, in our art world. I think that, there, in my opinion, there's never enough spaces to show work. So I think it's always great to have people out that are nurturing spaces like that, particularly for that long period of time. So shout out to Ray Dirks and the Mennonite Heritage Gallery. So,
yeah.
Well, I guess we'll wrap things up, but I want to thank you both, Patricia and Karen, for doing the interview, and all the best. And I hope this gets more people to see your terrific show.
The show.
Yeah. Once again, what are the gallery hours again?
From Monday to Friday,
Okay.
8:30 to 4:30. So it's open Mondays, which is very unusual for a gallery.
Is.
And then on Saturday, it's noon till 5.
Okay.
And again, just ring the doorbell and someone will let you in.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you, Derek.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Really fun.
Okay.
Yeah, it was lovely talking to you.
Likewise, Karen. We've never done an interview before, so it's
No.
great. Great to have you on finally.
Thanks.
All right, folks. Well, we'll wrap things up. You've just listened to a recorded interview with Patricia Yusuk and Karen Cornelius. This interview was recorded on October 25th, 2021, here on CKW 95.